Welcome to the Do Good Work podcast. Today we're talking to Gregg Gregory. And Gregg, after spending almost 20 years in real estate and mortgage banking, as well as radio broadcasting, Gregg has began his speaking and training career back in '96. He's earned his certified speaking professional designation in 2004 and now has been able to deliver over 2,000 keynotes, breakout sessions, and training workshops, and he's a leading authority in teamwork, leadership, and organizational culture. And he is on a mission to help individual teams as well as organizations develop a winning culture through effective leadership and teamwork. In today's podcast, I want you to pay attention to the framework that we kind of lay out. So like if you're creating a leadership playbook or a teamwork development playbook, this framework would be really good for you to just lay out as the front page of that playbook, and then building out your own strategies, your own processes, your own procedures for your mission, for your particular company's mission, company values, and what you stand for. Because this framework is pretty cool. It's a very versatile. You can fill it in as you go. So I want you to be able to, take away from this episode the framework that Gregg lays out. And from there, you can start applying and adapting it into your own organization as well as into your day-to-day habits. As always, this is Raul Hernandez. Do good work. Gregg, thanks for being on today.
Hey, Raul, not a problem. I'm excited to be here with you.
Awesome. I recently recorded and also wrote a mini essay around the power of words and how that translates into leadership, how that translates into communicating with others, and how that translates with not only collaboration and teamwork, but also how other team members view themselves and how our words shape their worldview, as well as the team's productive collaboration. So I know that's a lot to unpack, but I just want to let's dive into what do you think about that initial opening line?
Well, there's no doubt about it. I mean, our thoughts control our words and our words control our actions. So that's absolutely going to apply and run right down the line. We've got to make sure that the words we use, and the problem is with the words we use in face-to-face communication, are different than when we're just listening to them, either over a phone or even in an audio podcast, compared to in an email, even then compared to an instant message or text message. So they all kind of come about. And if we're not careful, not just the words, but how we're praising them, how we're pulling them together can really cause some challenges, or can really accelerate the team.
It's really true. And I know that we can go deeper on that, but there's also a statement that you sent my way, which is at its surface, very simple and good. There's elegance and simplicity, but I think there's a deeper level to it. I'm going to read that statement here because I really want to dive into the deeper layers of it. Is that teamwork is not just a group of individuals working together to achieve a common goal. So let's unpack that a little bit.
When I ask in my training programs to define a team, an effective team, often people will start off with a group of people working towards a common goal. So I have started to tell in the upfront, when I give the instructions, I'll often then say, and a group of people working towards a common goal is a good start, because that's what it really is a start. Because you can bring a group of people together that have never worked together and say, here's our end goal, get there. Okay, we're working together. You're still not a team, at least not an effective team. So I believe that you've got to have things like trust, respect, support, and then I use the term harmonizing skills. I specifically use the word harmonizing. A lot of folks like the word complementary, and that can work. But when we think about harmonizing, I use the example of the rock and roll song by Queen, Bohemian Rhapsody, and all of the overdubs that Freddie Mercury did. Now, in the 1970s, that was a production nightmare and an amazing feat. Today, it can be done so much easier with technology. In that song, when they do their operatic portion, the band knew in concerts that they could never produce that live. So when they got to that part in a concert, the stage would go black and it would just be lights showing. And they would play the original studio recorded version. Because in there, you've got three male voices doing all of those. And if you ever saw the movie, it even says, how many bloody times do you want me to sing Galileo? They made their own harmony. So in music, whether it's vocals or whether it's instruments, the harmonies that come together make it a much more powerful sound. Same thing in teamwork. So I believe that you got to have the harmonies. You've got to have the common goal. You've got to make sure that you're not only pursuing that common goal, you've also, and this is critical, have got to commit to achieving that common goal together. And therein is a huge hurdle for an effective team. And then we've got to have accountability, leadership accountability, mutual peer accountability. All of that has to be there. That's what's going to bring it together. That's why it's not just a group of people working towards
It
a
is a
common
map.
goal.
You just downloaded the map here for us, and I'm going to unpack this in a bit. However, I do love the beautiful illustration of harmony. I actually use the word harmony in the book Productive Profits as well, because it's about bringing it together. Because you mentioned earlier, complementary
Mm-hmm.
is not the same as harmony. I mean,
Yeah.
complementary is like, oh, I have a bass guitar and then a lead guitar. That's complementary. That doesn't mean
Mm-hmm.
you're going to make harmony. I think
Right.
that's really important to keep that in mind using the music analogy there. So let's go back, because you pretty much just laid out the roadmap, and there's a lot here, and I kind of want to take it towards the commitment and accountability being, I believe, to be, if not the most important, but the make it or break it for actually achieving success as a team. So we
Mm-hmm.
talked about building trust, respect, and support, kind of like that trifecta, that triangle that
Mm-hmm.
must exist at all times. Harmony and skill set. So making sure that we're selecting the teams or building up the teams to develop a harmony. This takes, I believe it would take time though. I don't think you could just get a random group of people and instantaneously they're in sync. I think it has to be a layer of building that trust, a layer of getting to know how they work with each other
Yep.
to achieve that goal, to commit together and then hit those goals. But let's talk about I think one of the pivotal pieces. I would love to know if you think if it's true or not, if it is a pivotal piece, but the accountability. Let's dive into that.
Before we dive into accountability, let's back it up 2 clicks. Trust is critical, and vulnerability trust and predictive trust are 2 different things. So you've got that coming together.
Well, let's describe both. Describe both so that we know.
Predictive trust is trusting that John will do his job when he says he's going to do it. That's predictability. Vulnerability trust is so much so that, Raul, I could say, hey, it's been a while since I've worked on this. I need your help. Allowing myself to be vulnerable, trusting you that you're not going to stab me in the back, is a pivotal piece so that we can then have conflict around ideas, that the team can have dialogue, communicate. I hate to use the term, in a safe space, yet it's a very powerful phrase. Once we have that, then we can get commitment. When I say commitment, I mean true commitment, not somebody who says, sure, I'm on board, and then they really aren't. And then we can get to accountability. Then, when I hold you accountable to doing the job you said you're going to do and you haven't done something, you're not going to feel like I'm picking on you. I can ask you about this. I can talk to you. You can talk to me. We've already had our trust. We've got our conflict. We've got our commitment. And now I can hold you accountable, and it's not feeling like I'm ripping you apart.
So it has to go back.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If I'm missing something, if we're missing something, either trust, commitment, or conflict, and we haven't had good communication, then guess what? When I try to hold you accountable, you're going to think I'm picking on you.
Very true. So before we can get to that, I think that the leaders, though, listening to this, even if you lead a small team, if you're a founder, if you're in a business division, or even if in a startup, you mentioned you don't like the phrase, but I think it's pretty powerful. That's the definition of creating a safe working environment where, I mean, the predictive trust, that makes a lot of sense. That's assumed I think that happens 80% of the day in most workplaces, but the vulnerability, I don't think, is either encouraged, or we know it depends on the culture that if we are vulnerable, we're just going to get stabbed. And I knew that, unfortunately, in corporate life before before
I
being
think
an
we all did
entrepreneur.
at one time or another.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that little bullets. Um, Talk to me a little bit how you see leaders being able to intentionally create this working environment and doing it in the way where, because I mean, we're all busy, right? Like we all say we don't have time, we can't make the time work, and I know that that's an excuse in and of itself, and we don't have to, you know, attack that excuse.
Yeah, we're
But
dealing with that on the gym front anyway already, so we don't have time.
how do we address that as leaders moving fast, tons of meetings, putting out fires? What's the, like, practical steps that you would encourage teams to take?
Opening it up so that each person has a time set aside. One of the things that I tell everybody to try and do is to get in touch with themselves, be able to sit back and take deep breaths. There's an app that you can put on your phone and you can deal with it called Heart Math. And you can get a little device that clips to your ear.
Huh.
What happens is we get going in a day and we hit the ground running sometimes 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And we're going like this all day long. And next thing you know, we're just being short with somebody. We're hurting somebody. We're not doing it intentionally. So I tell folks a couple times a day between meetings, take 90 seconds, 2 minutes, sit back. If you got the device, you can put it on your ear and just breathe. Recenter yourself to slow yourself down. And with the app and your phone, you can actually watch your heart rate change and get in more of a rhythmic approach. Then when you go to the next meeting, you're there. Now, what I say do is invite people to come into your office, virtual or in person, and just have them pop in. Hey, how are you? How's your week going? Absolutely nothing to do with work. We've got to get that back because we don't have that water cooler moment that we can say, hey, what'd you do this weekend? You know, all of that. How are the kids? Did the kids have a good softball or baseball practice? We've got to get that back into our lives because if we don't, we're just going to burn out.
And I love how you mentioned it starts with the self support. And this is not, I would argue that this is not something that has to happen during your working hours. This is the before and after. This is before your workload. This is your morning routines and your evening routines, but also how you embed that into everyday activity. I'd love to know the name of whatever device it clips to my ear. I know that some watches have like little pings, like say, "Hey, calm, take 15 seconds to take a deep breath." Or you can set an alarm on your computer for every hour for the computer to tell you it's 11 o'clock, it's 12 o'clock, it's 1 o'clock. It's a feature that most computers have. So to recenter oneself, but then as leaders, though, to actually take that, I mean, we can tell the team, sure, hey guys and gals, everyone here, take 5 minutes for yourself this morning before coming to work. Just do a quick breathing exercise. Now, how does that translate into everyday work as we're, you know, moving at such a rapid pace with information, with dissecting and making decisions every day, and also working with others? How do we like orchestrate that as leaders to just say, to ensure that we're not just saying and like talking to a wall and nothing is actually being done?
I want to make sure we touch the idea of doing it before and after work are critical. Before work, if we've had a long drive, if we've been dealing with stress stuff in the morning already, that's critical. At the end of the day, before we walk out of our office in the bedroom, if you will, or if we're driving home, whatever, again, it's critical before we go back home to the family. I'm also a believer that 90 seconds to 3 minutes in between meetings can help get you self-centered again. There's nobody, I don't care who you are, that cannot find 90 seconds just to sit back and recenter yourself. Calm down, take the deep breaths, and then go into the next meeting. I find myself having to do that 4 and 5 times a day. So I know that I can feel my heart rate. Most of us are in tune with our bodies. We can feel our heart rate starting to bump, our blood pressure popping. Okay, oh my God, I'm stressing out, I'm freaking out. My jaw starts to get tight, whatever it is. When that little synchronicity thing in your body hits, the next stopping point you get, take 90 seconds every day, multiple times a day. Some people may need it once or twice. Some people may, like me, I might need it 4 and 5 times.
That's fair. I can definitely see reflect on my day and know like, hey, I should probably take those 90 seconds or have some sort of Zoom app tell me, by the way, before you step in, reset.
Right.
I
Now,
think that'd
by
be
the
pretty
way,
cool.
there is two other points I want to bring out here, and I learned these from my physical therapist, by the way.
Hmm.
One of them is called the 20-20-20 rule, and that is every 20 seconds, excuse me, every 20 minutes, look at something at least 20 feet away for at least 20 seconds. And what happens is if you're like you and I are, we're in Zoom meeting after Zoom meeting in a day. We have to get up and just let our eyes stop, because if we don't, what happens is we've been staring at the screen for so long. And staring at a screen for that long, our eyes dry out, we strain more, we're more tired, and the end of the day meetings are going to be a little more snippy than those early morning meetings.
True.
The other one is to avoid something called stagnant hypoxia. Now, this one I actually learned from a retired Air Force trainer. Every 45 minutes, stand up, excuse the expression I'm going to use, but you got to do what Taylor Swift says. Shake it out.
Hmm.
Just get up, jump up and down for 15 seconds to get the blood flowing, because sitting on our tushies starts to do that. And what happens is that makes us a lousy team player.
Interesting. No, this is a lot of the individual habits that we can exercise throughout the day. And these are all small habits.
Mhm.
You can set reminders on your calendar. There's apps that tell you to do the 2020
Yeah.
rule. Um, I think where we translate this now into working async with our teams, showing up as better team members, as leaders, how do we facilitate? What do you see being daily habits of a leader to facilitate progress within teams in an encouraging way, motivation way, even though there might be, difficulties to put out, problems that we're resolving in the team, the company. Like what would you say to those leaders right now if they were in the Zoom with us?
A couple of thoughts. Number one, go back to Dr. Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Habit number 7 is called Sharpen the Saw. If you haven't read the book in years, just go find habit 7. If we resharpen our saw, so leaders need to encourage other people, the power behind that. They have to invite people. You might even have a meeting twice a week with your team and have everybody say, what did you do to recenter yourself? Getting them to understand the importance of doing it. And the leader, of course, needs to be upfront and saying that he or she did exactly the same thing. I sat back, I did this. Some people do yoga, some people do meditation. Some of us don't have the time to do 5 minutes of meditation, 90 seconds. So just encouraging it, letting people know it's okay to do that. There's so much around mental health today. And 5 years ago, that wasn't the case. Look where we've come with mental health. This is the forefront of where we were 5 to 7 years ago with a lot of the mental health issues. Just let yourself open up, and the leaders can encourage it. That's absolutely the number. And then you can even have some fun around it. You can create activities about people who do different things each week, and have the team vote on somebody that actually did it, and then they get a squishy ball or something to kind of let them know that, hey, you did that.
I think that's important too, because what we're discussing here isn't like, oh, this is the winning strategy, or this is the playbook, or this is the action you got to do today to
Yeah.
get. These are micro, habitual repetitions within a week, within a day that, and I'll cut the sentence off there, but I'll use an analogy that I heard recently about what success is. And I kind of want to kind of share it here, is that success isn't this pinnacle moment. It's standing on the mountain of all the mistakes, actions, all the, like, say, quote unquote, some of the garbage or stuff that you've done in your past, and being on top of it, not under it. And I
Mhm.
think that's what we're discussing here, is these
Absolutely.
actions are so simple in a very strategic way, where we focus on creating the safety within the team, creating a peaceful or like mindful environment, ensuring that we have tight communications, making sure that we have the right skill sets. And that's just, a level of trust, discipline, as well as team selection, team
Mhm.
growth, team nurture. But then also identifying the goals, communicating that, getting shared commitment, and then making sure that we have elaborate, accountability, either with scorecards, with metrics, with daily stand-ups, whatever you need. And I think I mean, that process in itself, it wasn't invented by us here on the podcast. That's been existing since humans have communicated, and how to work together. But I think that what we're trying to do here is adapt it to a way where it's more applicable to the online world, as well as to now we're working globally, remote, async, and being able to practice these daily habits, which I think are not only important to practice oneself, but to encourage, like you mentioned, within the team. It's these small things that create a bigger whole.
And what you just said is so pivotal. I'm listening to a book on Audible right now by Mark Eaton, The Four Commitments. And one of the commitments he starts talking about is, and gets into in the last part of that, is about the fundamentals. Now, for those who don't know, Mark Eaton, 7 foot 4 inches tall, still holds the record today for the most number of block shots in a single season by an NBA athlete. Amazing gentleman. And he was saying today, and this goes to your point, basketball players that don't understand the hard fundamentals, dribbling, closing their eyes and dribbling, no look pass, all of the basic fundamentals aren't long for the league, and they aren't long for a team. The same is true in every single business. The habits that we do on the fundamentals of our work. And I believe that taking care of ourselves. So let's go back to Eleanor Roosevelt. She said, you can't brighten the path of another without brightening the path of your own. So if we take care of ourselves and brighten our path, we will then start to brighten the path of others. We'll start to mentor, we'll start to nurture and develop. So one thing I ask leaders to do in my workshops, when I do a training, I ask them to write down the name of the best boss, and I use the word boss, that they've had in their adult work life. I don't ask them to share it, just to write it down. And then write 3 bullet points why. Then I say, I want them to go to find that best boss. Call them or go see them. Do not email them that they did this exercise and why. Number one, you'll make that boss feel better. You'll feel better because you make that person feel better. That's the power in that. Then I ask, if I were to ask your team to write down the name of their best boss, would they write you? And if you've done your job correctly, they will say yes, because you've done everything that we just talked about.
Consistently over time. And that's the key word here, consistency over time. So I think that this roadmap, I'm just going to repeat it one more time. So if we're listening to this in the car, if you're taking notes, if you're washing the dishes, if you're walking the dog, those are maybe some of the things, some of the places I listen to podcasts.
Oh, yeah.
If you're listening to this at that time, I kind of want to go in the roadmap. And this is a simple roadmap that I think, Gregg laid out, that is not the roadmap, but it's really encompassing. And I'm seeing this within my teams like today. So I want you to take note of this, is creating that environment with the vulnerability trust as well as the predictive trust, being able to create commitments around a certain goal and a shared commitment, and working with team members that have a harmony of skill sets. That's a hiring initiative, that's an HR initiative, that's a qualification initiative. When you're actually onboarding people, do they have harmony? And even doing trials, or even having people like show up at the office or the virtual office, paying for a day and say, hey, come on, well, this is not HR advice. So if you can't pay them for a day, don't do that. But if they can at least shadow for a day to review, like how do they fit with the team? And then working towards, I would say, strict but holistic accountability to making sure that the team is meeting it, but also knowing that it's for the good of the entire team to be in line and in sync.
Great teams are full of great players that focus on the betterment of the team, not on the betterment of themselves.
And that's a tough lesson to swallow, especially for those A players listening to this. Just
and those
knowing
that's
how Michael Jordan became better too, though.
Yeah. Well, even Dennis Rodman.
Yeah.
They became better when they started being less selfish. Yet you have to be selfish before you can become less selfish.
Crazy dichotomy there.
Yeah.
Well, Gregg, this was a fabulous conversation. For our listeners out there, what's the best place that people can go to one, thank you for this episode and also learn more about you?
Well, our website is very simple. We help people teams rock. So it's teams with an S, rock.com. And you can find me on social media anywhere with that exact same thing, TEAMSROCK. Whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, you can find us there. Follow us, drop me a note. Would love to help.
Put those links in the show notes, Gregg.
All
Thanks
right.
again, man.
As I say, don't have a good day, because that's just being average.